everyone. Welcome to the Integrate Yourself podcast. We're your hosts, Allison Pillow and Maya Gottlieb. Thanks for tuning in. Today, we're speaking with Esther Gokhale of the Gokhale Method. Esther Gokhale has been involved in integrative therapies all her life. Her early interest in healing led her to study biochemistry at Harvard and Princeton, and later acupuncture at the San Francisco School of Oriental Medicine. After experiencing a crippling back pain, and after her first pregnancy, and after an unsuccessful back surgery, she later developed the Gokhale Method, a unique systematic approach to help people find their bodies way back to pain-free living. The Gokhale Method continues to grow as qualified Gokhale Method teachers now teach the method worldwide. Esther's book, 8 Steps to a Pain-Free Back, has sold over 100,000 copies and has been translated into 8 languages. Esther hosted the nationally televised program Back Pain, the Primal Posture Solution. She's also presented at conferences including TEDx Stanford, Ancestral Health Symposium, which is where I saw her, and Weston A. Price Foundation, and Primal Con. In May 2013, the New York Times featured Esther in an article giving her the title, The Posture Guru of Silicon Valley. Esther, welcome to our show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, no problem. Esther, I wanted to start by just talking about your personal journey and how you came to develop the Gokhale Method.
Yeah, so I came at it the hard way, which is how many people arrive at their passions. I had an L5-S1 herniated disc in my first pregnancy, and it was crippling. It felt like an ice pick in my butt. I couldn't carry anything, I was told it would go away after the kid is born, after the baby's born. No, it became worse and worse, and all the usual things were not helping it. Conservative, alternative, I tried everything I knew about, and it just got worse. And finally I had surgery, and that made it better, but then a year later I had a reherniation of the same disc. And I was told, can I share screen on here? Will you be able to see?
Yeah. Sure.
Let's try that, because I can show you an MRI of my back. There it is, 1987.
Oh, wow.
And there's my L5-S1 disc herniation. Wow. So this is it's huge. This is on a scale of 0 to 10, it's a 9. And as you can see, it pushing the spinal cord out of the way, and it helps understand why I was not such a happy camper.
So is that similar to the spondylosis, where they start to have the articulation, where
It was a plain herniated disc, but a very severely herniated disc. And by the time they did surgery on me, it was a sequestrated disc. Then that means you have fragments floating around that are broken off, floating around the canal, and that made it difficult for me to lie down at night. After 2 hours, I would be in extreme spasm, and I would have to walk around the block and try to get rid of spasm. I didn't want to take pain meds because I was nursing my baby. It was a miserable time, and all your future hopes are dashed. And I had wanted to have more children. I was being recommended never to have any more children because of various bulging discs and a weak back, whatever that meant. And was very compromised. My mother-in-law had to fly in and bail us out. It was very different from what I was expecting in my mid-20s.
Do you remember having anything when you were younger, or was it kind of just the onset of being pregnant and then having
I had a few episodes. Once windsurfing, once doing a very suddenly, without a warm-up, a very extreme yoga pose where I put my ankle behind my neck. I was a yoga model in Bombay.
Oh, right.
I had done this kind of thing before, but it had been a while. And here I was in college being asked to do parlor tricks, and I obliged. And next thing I knew, and that was my first episode, I was in the ER, and having x-rays taken, and the usual, like, you don't know what's going on. Most people in their first episode, it's pretty scary. And I had repeat episodes, and then I had a severe herniation.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
I remember hearing you talk at the AHS presentation, Ancestral Health Symposium, about you being the yoga model and having to bend your back all the time for people, and people clapped. And I can relate to that because I was a gymnast and I did the similar things, and I had issues too later down the road with my the L5 area. And
Interesting.
so I can. It's the worst pain to go through.
It's horrible. I mean, there are certain areas, certain endeavors where people have systematic errors, like yoga is one of them. We're encouraged to back bend and forward bend, and where you do this from is not very well specified.
Right.
And there are very particular places where you want most of your back bend to happen, and the rest shouldn't be back bending. So the way I was doing it, just really swaying my back and weakening my discs and so on. Forward bends, you don't want to round your spine because then you're loading your discs in the most dangerous direction. Not a good idea, but it's done all the time. People want to reach the floor. People want to do advanced poses and so on. So there's a strong pressure that way. And in gymnastics, the form is flawed, like at the end of a routine, a woman gymnast especially will throw her arms out and arch her back, and this is how it's done. So everybody does it that way, and it is not a good thing. And in fact, women gymnasts, and I was a gymnast too, so I got double duty, they get into trouble. I don't know if you remember Nadia Comaneci when she won
she was my favorite
gold medal.
Yeah.
She had 2 back surgeries within 1 year of winning that
I did
Olympic.
not realize that.
And that is not uncommon. And you don't hear about that part. We only see the 15 and 16-year-olds doing all sorts of extreme things. And, at some point, there needs to be some pressure from the public that needs to get knowledgeable and decide we don't want to clap for those, legionnaires who are being in the ring with the lions, and we no longer want to clap for the bulls being speared, and we no longer want to clap for the gymnasts who are like throwing their backs into really unhealthy poses and self-destructing. And so as knowledge builds and awareness builds, I think there'll be healthier pressures. Right now in football, we have somewhat healthy pressures building up against, like, maybe we don't want to watch people like ram themselves into objects the size of a refrigerator and doing all kinds of brain damage, right?
Absolutely.
And sometimes the injuries are because we are not well prepared in our baseline postures, and we could better prepare ourselves. But sometimes it's because the endeavor itself is problematic.
Right. And I think you were talking about that in your book, which was an interesting way of kind of maybe segueing this, is what the difference between an antiverted and a forward tilt position. For some people, it is where they sway the back and then they tilt the pelvis, whereas your conversation is what I understand, and correct me if I've read this wrong, is that the pelvis is hinging more than it is more that rounding part. Is that correct?
So what I teach is an antiverted pelvis, which means we want the pelvis to be angled relative to its neighbor, the spine. Like L5 is the immediate neighbor, the bottom of the heap of vertebrae. Okay? And you want an angle between L5 and S1, or the sacrum. Now, this person, if the angle is happening up higher, that's a very different scenario. The pelvis is still angled relative to the floor, and this scenario and this scenario is given exactly the same label of forward pelvis. So all they're saying is your pelvis is angled relative to the floor. They're not telling you whether it's angled at L5S1, which is a very healthy place for it to be angled, or it's angled up higher, maybe L2, maybe L3, maybe L1, which is a very unhealthy scenario. So I think the nomenclature is just it's very confusing, and it obfuscates the matter at hand, which is that you want an angle down low at L5S1, and you don't want angle up top. That is a sway. Mm-hmm. So you want to, first, there's an order in which you want to fix this. If you do have a sway up top and your pelvis, in this sway situation, the pelvis is actually not at all angled relative to L5, right? Mm-hmm. It's just flat. It's actually a tucked pelvis, even though it is angled forwards compared to the floor. Right. By the time you straighten out the sway and you put this person upright, they're too flat. They need their bum out. They need their bum out. But they need their bum out from the right place, which is L5S1. Which is
where you talk about the tail. Like if someone had a tail?
That's a way to envision it. Like if you imagine a tail, your tail would be out behind you, but I use that when I'm talking about sitting. You don't want to sit on your tail. You want your tail out behind you, but that's not enough of a description, because you could do this forward pelvis swayed thing and have your tail out behind you. Still wouldn't be a good position. So you need your behind, but it needs to angle out from L5S1. That disc in our species is wedge-shaped. And when you tuck your pelvis, whether it's like this or like this, wherever you don't have a good amount of angle between L5 and S1, you are squishing, you are tucking, and you are putting pressure on the front part of the disc and squishing the contents backwards. If you see this illustration, you see two anatomy book illustrations of the human spine. So the one on this side comes from a modern anatomy book. Okay, this is the so-called S-shaped spine that we've all come to think of as normal. It's the basis for all the ergonomic furniture having an exaggerated lumbar support. It's the basis for people sort of advising others to sit up straight, stand up straight. This one comes from an anatomy book published in 1911.
Wow.
And it's really different, and it makes so much more sense. So this is what I teach. I call it a J-spine. Here's the bum. And you see how there's a lot of angle between L5 right there and the sacrum. Right. And this allows the wedge-shaped L5S1 disc to have a wedge-shaped home, which is a good fit. It also allows the cylindrical discs up higher in the lumbar area to have a cylindrical home. That's a fit. Yeah. This shape that we've come to think of as normal it really makes no sense at all from an anatomical point of view. Like you can see all these discs, which are cylindrical in our species. Excuse me.
Bless you.
You can see how they are forced into a wedge, and this is not a good fit, and you are wearing down your discs. Every time you sit in a car which has an exaggerated lumbar support, or an ergonomic chair that has an exaggerated lumbar support, it's just encouraging you to have this shape that we think is natural, but really it's just average. It's what people in these days do. I think in many fields, we mistake average for normal and even ideal.
Absolutely.
That's true. Yeah.
I agree with that.
You're well aware of that. And, when you have a population that has an 85% incidence of back pain, you don't want to copy average. No. You want to go back in time and you want to see what people used to do when they didn't have so much back problems, and you want to see what cultures do that don't have so much back problem. I'm going to share another slide with you. These Ubang tribesmen, you can see how their behinds are out behind, and then up higher, it's a nice, elongated, relatively straight back. Here's your J-spine, and I can show you many more slides like that, like ancestral populations, like these Greek statues here, behinds out behind, and up higher, a nice J-spine. Look at any kid, they got that same shape, bum out, up higher, relatively little lumbar curve, pretty straight up and down. And this is what I'm arguing makes sense and what is our heritage, our genetic heritage, our cultural heritage until very recently. And there you have it. So this is what we're shepherding people towards.
That's incredible.
Awesome.
I remember seeing, looking back on photos of myself when I was a child and I had that kind of posture, and people were always telling me that my posture was bad when I was younger.
And what about it? What about it did they not like?
Because I had that...
Your bum out?
Yes.
You know, there are certain places and certainly some generations that have been taught that it's somehow bad to have a bum.
Yeah.
Like somewhere in the flapper era, it became bad to have a bum. And you have to tuck your bum and make it disappear. It's about developing your glutes. You know, when you squeeze your glutes appropriately with every step. You want every step to be a rep. Then those muscles get toned and they just automatically hold your bum back. Okay? Yeah. You also want to relax rectus abdominis, the six-pack muscle.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
People tend to overdo things on that muscle. Like all the abdominal exercise we do in modern times tends to be for rectus, crunches, sit-ups, you know? And that's the least important of the 4 layers of ab muscles you have. You really want to focus on the 3 deeper layers. And if you have over-exercised, over-tensed rectus, then you want to learn to let it go so it's not pulling up your pubic bone and tucking your bum.
Right.
So that's an important thing.
And that's something you were talking in your book, you talk about in terms of how to help people walk, whether you bring them into the book a little bit by stages, and the stages are where the sitting stretch and the lying stretch, and then you go into the tall walking ability, because most of the time when I work with clients, we always have some conversation about how the glute's not activating, right? So the whole culture has gotten
glute amnesia is the buzzword.
It is. And if you ask someone to squeeze their bum, they really don't really understand. So this book has actually been a really helpful kind of information of how to get them to reactivate that. But it is something that I found that was helpful for some of my clients.
It's difficult to teach it well, you know, and what I've discovered needs to happen is you want to teach in many ways at once. You want to teach visually, and that's why the book has like over 1,100 images, right? Step by step, instructions, pictures on the side showing all these people in other cultures doing what it is we're talking about. So that's visually compelling. It also has to be intellectually compelling because it is going to feel weird. Any change feels strange. And so how are you going to convince someone to do this weird feeling thing, you know, and really weird feeling thing? You know, I have students say, whoa, I feel like some kind of orangutan. Are my knuckles hitting the floor already? Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting way of saying it, because the feeling about what you're changing is sometimes scary for people because they're not used to it. But the first thing I do is say, look at this book, you know, here, like read the book. I actually had a client just purchase it, and mainly just so that, you know, they have a reinforcement to look back on it. But can you tell another way to, you know, cue people? What would it feel like to squeeze their bum, and kind of give them an example of what that means so that they understand what you're
it's not trivial. We don't start with walking usually. To stand, because there's so many moving parts, we like them to learn this J-spine in a stack sitting position. But before you teach them stack sitting, because it's not safe for everyone to start with stack sitting. Like if they have a herniated L5-S1 disc and you suddenly put your bum out back, you could be sequestrating your disc. Not good, right? So, and so what we always want to begin with is sort of I think of it like preparing the clay. So I always like to begin people with stretch sitting and stretch lying, because a lot of the muscles in the area have gotten short and tight and are squishing various tissues in the spine, squishing the discs, squishing the nerves, jamming the edges of the bones, especially if you have a poor shape and poor length, right? So it's all jammed together, and now you got the edges of the vertebrae kind of grinding against each other, stressing each other. That causes arthritic change. That causes bone spurs to happen. Calcium, our bodies are designed to deposit calcium where there is stress. And so if you have stress in an inappropriate part, that's going to start you on the osteoarthritis path. And just because everybody has it doesn't make it normal. Yeah.
True.
That's
very
true.
true.
First. So I always start people with length. And that's something that can be taught to anybody, no matter what they have or don't have. As long as they're gentle, that's good for everyone. And then they can start on stack sitting and tall standing, and then comes walking. That's the way we like to do it in our courses. Yeah, go ahead.
In phases, basically, is what I hear you saying. Yeah, because sometimes
step by
people...
step.
Yeah.
Read the book.
Yeah. Keep it safe.
Yeah, the book is great.
Good. The book is really good, but if you want to learn how to play golf, or you want to learn how to play tennis or play the piano, there are books that are helpful, but you can only go so far with the book.
Yeah.
So what we always tell our people, you really need coaching, and you need it from someone who has done this whole track and can guide you appropriately, because there are pitfalls, like I just outlined. Stick your butt out behind you, not a good way. You might increase the sway. Right. You might further impinge your nerves and damage your discs and so on. So step by step, hands-on coaching, multiple channels, visual, intellectual, hands-on, and we keep adding layers. So now we've added a lot of technological layers that are exciting, and you will hear about very soon. Because we've started experimenting with how to give people feedback in even more ways.
Oh, great.
Well, I wanted to go down the road of how you a little bit more kind of backtrack and talk about your experience in India and your observations of people and how they were standing and bending and sitting and I know that was a big influence on your work today. So I'd love to hear about that as well.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in India. I was born in Holland. My mom's Dutch, but my father's Indian. And this was a very lucky background to have, because I was constantly navigating multiple cultures. And that's my professional job now,
Yeah, right.
The best from different cultures. So it's the African way of holding babies and training them to sit, and it's the Portuguese way of striding in a certain way and inspiring Caucasians that this is not just Africans who have this, and so on. But I go back to India regularly. India is such a rich cultural place. You have so many things. This January, this year, I went to Orissa, which is in East India, and it is the state where you have the most tribal cultures. Now, I had been there as a child, but mainly to see the temples and the tourist spots. This time I went inland, bumping and jogging along, and there to go to the markets, the tribal markets, and talk to people and observe them. And that was amazing, an amazing experience that I want to go back, and I want to do some serious research and documentation before it's gone. You have people living there. So it reminded me of being in Africa. Very similar. Even the costumes and certainly the ways of moving the body. So the more you go off the beaten track, the more you locate ancestral and natural ways of doing things. In modern times, things have changed so much, so quickly, that we've lost our unbroken kinesthetic thread of wisdom. Yeah. It's like it used to be that grandfathers, grandmothers are influencing what's happening with grandchild. Now we're traveling all over the place, so making it up. And so it's one person's wisdom instead of that long chain of wisdom.
Right.
And it doesn't quite match, especially when you're in a culture where the furniture is designed poorly and you have a whole bunch of guidelines that are not just ineffective but counterproductive. Like it's shocking how bad our postural guidelines are. Chin up, right. Chest out, tuck your pelvis, do crunches, S-shaped spine, pull your shoulders back, sit up straight. It's all counterproductive.
Which is why it makes such great money for the health industry, because we all start throwing in more of what you have to do, and instead of going back to the primal movements, which are just, coming back, and there's a lot of good programs that are really showing that movement, but we definitely have caused probably more havoc than we realize, and trying to auto-correct things, and put it in a way that's a little more confusing.
So I want to say, I've been very happy with my relationship with the medical industry because, doctors are some of the finest people. They don't choose their profession for cynical reasons. They're there to help people. The industry has some problems, no doubt. The way the financial incentives are set up and so on is unfortunate. But those people have sweated. My daughter is a third-year resident now, so I know it from the inside now. And those people work really hard. They have their heart in the right place. And if you give them something sensible, they will work with you. That's my favorite referral is from physicians. And we've actually started getting included in physician offerings. Gokhale Method is now an official part of Pam Sutter Health's new integrative medicine offering. So, if you're moderate in your claims, which I'm very careful to be, my background is in biochemistry. I was trained in scientific method. I have a lot of respect for scientific method. I think it's important not to overclaim. And they respect that. And I've found them to be the best people to work with. So I go to physician wellness retreats and I'm a speaker and they like it's not airy-fairy, it's down to earth, it's effective. We've had over now 500 physicians take our course. They refer their patients. It's a very happy collaboration. And when something goes seriously wrong, and someone does need surgery, I'm extremely grateful that there's someone well-trained enough to take care of that because I can't take care of every problem.
Sure.
I just think that it's unfortunate they're the first resort often. They should be the last resort, those surgeons. Absolutely. So that's a problem in our system. They keep revising and that they use scientific methods somewhere, and so they revise. Now the directions are don't send to surgery. In fact, don't provide. Now they've got everything taken care away from them by degrees, surgeries, the cortisone shots, which, when you really need them, it's fantastic. I sometimes will send people. It's like this person can barely move.
Yeah.
They can't even listen to what I'm teaching. They're in so much pain. Go create a window of opportunity so we can improve this person's lot.
Right. Because when they're in a lot of pain.
I have more use for those surgeons and the physiatrists and so on than the modern, recommendations. I think that there's a very important place for them, but a limited place.
Thinking about was when I watched your presentation and I was kind of in awe about, things I hadn't thought about before, about people watching each other as they walk down the street in the villages, and like thinking about how in our society, really, if you like watch somebody walking down the street or stare, it's kind of, you're looked at as kind of strange, or they're like, why are you looking at me? Or so there's different, but that's such a huge part of learning from each other that we don't even think about.
We find ways to watch each other anyway.
We have sneaky.
It's not exactly. Straight up staring.
Yeah. It's that eye, like I'm not watching you.
I mean, that's one of the functions of gyms. I find it's like a piazza. You go there and you can kind of observe everyone. We have our different ways of observing. It's out the corner of the eye. It's in a little, you're surveying the field and you happen to notice, but we're definitely looking at each other. That said, in our classes, when people first come in, one of the lines I always introduce early is, I say, in our culture, we're strongly discouraged from staring at each other. In this class, you're very strongly encouraged to stare at each other. And if anyone feels self-conscious about that, let me know and I'll protect you. But otherwise, this is part of the richness of having a group course. So that's one of my lines. And I have yet to find a person who wants protection. So I've been saying this in every course for years and years, and nobody objects. Once it's kind of disarmed in that way and people have been given permission, everyone feels very comfortable. And then they learn that much better.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. Takes the barriers down
Exactly.
Yeah.
Esther, what was one of your biggest aha moments? Like what kind of like that moment that just everything kind of set in and we're,
So many, I mean, I would say just
one
the
of them.
realization that there are populations that don't have so much problems.
Right.
It's like, that's the biggest aha. Like, whoa, that makes sense. It makes sense that we're designed well. It doesn't make sense that we're kind of falling apart and falling over like dominoes. I think that's probably the biggest aha. Like, hey, we're actually well designed. We just arrived without a user's manual.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
And totally.
Now we need to figure it out backwards. Like, okay, what? I have a section in my book theorizing about why we've kind of lost our way, not only in our bodies, but also our theories, and even at the higher level, at the medical professional level, what's described as natural is not necessarily natural, or normal. There's a lot, yes, very big thing when you start roaming around and improvising how you raise kids, and you don't really have the grandparents there informing the process. I think that's a big factor. The fashion industry has not helped.
Yeah.
Like around the flapper era, where it became fashionable to tuck the pelvis. After World War I, people were down, needed a freshen up. And the freshen up was this new sort of easygoing way, but lost the baby with the bathwater there.
Right.
So yes, we became very casual, but we lost our, like the old way was reframed as being stiff. And but then the way in which we became easygoing included sort of lounging around with the tucked pelvis and a slumpy look, and that became framed as new and cool. And we've stayed with that. I mean, if you look at the fashion industry, that's still the norm.
Right.
Tuck pelvis, kind of leading with the hips, lots of extra curves all through the body that don't work well.
Slouching. Kind of like
yeah.
But then like you said, don't sit straight up, is because you're not performing what like the generations prior, the ones that used to sit straight up, because their spines were more straight versus more angled in terms of the spine.
Yeah,
so it's kind of
problematic too.
Kind of counterintuitive now to tell someone to sit up, because you're pulling a lot more different directions, and it's even harder for them to maintain because they're straining, right? Versus just relaxing into a seat.
Right. So, it gets technical. Like a lot has to do with the way your pelvis is positioned. Like if you have a tucked pelvis and in effect you're sitting on your imaginary tail, then you're setting yourself up. The physics of the building blocks up above is such that you're going to be slumping and your head is forward and your shoulders are forward. And then trying to fix that, because every parent sees their kid doing that and knows something's wrong. And then we ask them to sit up straight. And now we do this opposite thing, which is arching our back. We haven't really reset the pelvis. We don't know how to give good directions. So we say, sit up straight, pull your shoulders back, and now you got two problems instead of one, like you were saying earlier. So it's, so we have different directions, like for kids so we say, put your dragon tail out behind you, or, stack your blocks, not sit up straight, so sit like a princess. There are different directions that work better than the conventional ones.
Yeah. Right. Now I'm finding that we have a new thing that's in the mix, where we have people looking at their phones and playing video games and all kinds of stuff now. So that actually brings a whole new thing into the arena.
In several ways. It can be done well. Somewhere on the internet there's a picture of a gorilla with his cell phone, and he has wonderful posture. He pulls that cell phone up to him, and he's got a nice straight neck, and he's got no problem. You can do it well. But people, once you got poor habits to begin with, and now you got this little thing that is very engaging and drawing you in, and so much so that you're not even hearing from your body that, hey, something's not very happy. Now you got, cascading problems. So can be fixed. It's not rocket science to fix these, like being at a computer for extended periods or being with the cell phone. Not at all hard to train someone to do it well, but it's not happening.
But you have developed a back pad for chairs that helps people with the posture?
Here we have it.
That's cool. Yeah. I kind of feel like I need that in my car, because I just got a new car and the seats are terrible.
Yep. So we made it for the car originally, and you can see it has sticky pads. These are rubberized.
Nice.
Okay. And so it hangs. It hangs like a necklace from the headrest. Mm-hmm. So it's hanging behind your mid-back, below your shoulder blades. And then the idea is you create gentle traction. You hike your back higher up against the backrest than it would ordinarily connect. And now you got gentle traction in your back. And now you are very safe to navigate all the bumps and jogs in the road. And that's what it was originally created for. But it also gives you just background traction, which is extremely useful to anyone whose muscles are a little tight and tense and has created extra sway, or has never tried to have good posture and has always been in a C. That person needs extra length too. So either way, whether you have been swaying and you're backwards curved, or you've been slumping and you're forwards curved in your lumbar spine, having this kind of cushion behind you.
And that's the difference that you were talking about with the lumbar support. Like some people think, oh, I'm sitting up straight, but I'm actually using a lumbar that's actually not creating that elongation that you're asking. Right.
So this is about getting rid of some of your lumbar curve, not creating lumbar curve or, supporting what lumbar curve you have, but rather stretching it out towards that J-spine lumbar area where the discs now have both the right shape home to live in and some extra length so they can rehydrate, because human discs don't, easily repair themselves. If you keep putting stress on them, the same stress that caused the problem, they have no way to repair themselves. There's no blood getting in there. Right. After the age of 7 in our species, there's no blood flow in the discs. So the only way you get them to you get like building blocks and nutrition and fluid into the discs is by decompressing them. So every time you elongate your spine, and this is the first technique we teach people because they're sitting anyway, they might as well be stretch sitting and making it a therapeutic activity instead of sitting there like lumps and then blaming sitting for what ails them. You know, it's become very fashionable to blame sitting for everything. It used to be, if you go back several decades ago, people were blaming standing for everything because they were standing at assembly lines and they had varicose veins. There's lots of research showing standing doesn't all the time isn't great either. So what are you going to do, right?
That's really interesting.
Because we don't really squat in this world. Like in the culture here, we don't do a lot of squatting and sitting.
And you don't see people waiting at bus stations squatting.
No, and it's not part of people do different things in different cultures, and they're all good solutions. Like our ancestors didn't squat for a long time, haven't squat. We've got good solutions. They include chairs. They include surfaces we sit on. It's not a bad solution, but it needs to be done well. In the last 100 years, we kind of forgot everything.
Yeah, I appreciate that because, a lot of people still like to use chairs and they like to sit and,
Yes.
What do you think about sitting on the floor? What's your opinion on that?
It's a bad idea for a modern Westerner because a modern Westerner doesn't have the hip joints that allow you to either do a full squat with a healthy back shape, that ends up being rounded. I mean, I can show you what I consider to be a really healthy squat. This was from January this year, and I am in the marketplace, and you can see, look at this woman's back. Look how straight it is. And look where her knees go up. Like it's almost a U-turn here. And then it's another U-turn here. And then it's a very acute angle at the ankles.
Now, almost like she's that. Yeah.
It's almost like she's pronated.
No, she's not pronated. That's part of the point. You don't want to be pronated.
But it looks like it, but you're saying it's not.
No. I can show you. Like these people are not prone. That's part of the point. They're not pronating their feet, but most modern Western people would be. If they force themselves to squat, they pronate their feet, they round their backs, and they do all kinds of damage to the ligaments.
Right.
And I don't think most people are able to do a full squat without damaging their ligaments. And I don't think they should be pushing themselves. They can do B squats, they can do partial squats, they can do hip hinging is available to everyone. If you want to work on the floor, do things on the floor, that's what they do in Africa, and that is available to us with a little practice and with stretching out the hamstrings.
Yeah.
Which is good advice to those who want to try to, change slowly through their own process, but to know that they may never get a complete squat like they think that they're supposed to get to, because there's a lot of people that I've worked with that have had similar kind of situations. They try to change something and it doesn't help them. It makes something worse.
And that happens a lot when people try to go bush. It's like, okay, I'm this modern urban person and suddenly I'm going to pretend I'm a hunter-gatherer. Well, there are a few things missing between here and then. You got to do your prep a bit. You can't just suddenly throw off your shoes and go running around on cement barefoot. It doesn't immediately work, and maybe it won't ever work. It depends on how your feet are. It depends on squatting. Again, it's like, I see a lot of really, really problematic shapes as people force themselves into all, these ancestral, pseudo-ancestral positions. So
you talked about feet. Will you talk about the kidney bean shape and why that's important?
Yeah. So shape, you see it in little kids' footprints. There's a kind of curve in the foot. And in these ancestral and indigenous people, you see that same shape preserved into adulthood. And I believe it's a natural shape for human feet. And it's arrived at by really using the feet a great deal. So it's one of the things we teach in our courses is how you use your feet as part of walking. You know, your feet are pretty complex, and they're not made to just sit there like a prosthesis. They're made to work.
Yeah,
and
right.
and grab in different ways. So these are all things that can be learned. None of this is rocket science, but neither is it trivial. And so we teach people to make these changes bit by bit, step by step. People are here, they want to go there, and each one needs to be shepherded. You know, like we get, our classes are capped at 8 people. Okay. Before the teacher sees the student, they have read all about their history, their medical history, their activities, their sports or no sports, their children, whatever. We have a picture of these people in between lessons and before the lessons. And then we shepherd each person depending on their history, their surgeries, their weaknesses, their goals to get to a better place. So we take a lot of we're very bent on excellence. We don't want to just do a half-assed job.
Nice.
So we've really poured a lot of resources into creating technology that will help, into allowing teachers to focus on what they need to do, which is use their eyes, use their hands, use their spirit to encourage students, and not like be digging around in a file for a piece of paper with an exercise. You know, all of these kind of things are automated in our ecosystem. And, before and after pictures, we have our own built in-house app, and teachers click and it goes and it's secure. It goes to their account and they can watch their progress, and it takes the teacher no time. They just click, boom, done. Student gets a notification and can see that material, that content stored on the web, on their account. So we do a lot of things like that help, because people need to see, oh, now I realize I really arch backwards. I saw my photos and I'm feeling strange now, but now I can see in my photo that, hey, this is upright. It might feel weird, but it isn't weird, and so on. So
that's awesome. One last question I have is, a lot of people talk about like strengthening the core, and you mentioned how the rectus abdominis doesn't need to have that much work on as we've created, but what have you seen about that part of people saying strengthen the core? Because I find that people are not getting what that really means. They're creating like a muscle that needs to like be strong all the time. Do you see any of that being an issue in your institute?
I absolutely do. And the way I've addressed this problem is to sidestep it. You know, instead of arguing with people on how they're misusing the word core, because core is used every which way, So I've created a whole different vocabulary that no one's arguing with me about. I don't talk about neutral pelvis, because I don't talk about forward pelvis. It's like, whatever, you keep going. I'm not going to engage with this nonsense. And, we're working on the inner core set, which is very well defined, and nobody's going to argue what that means. And we can keep it clean, and so the public is well served.
Okay.
So with core, I don't use that word. It would be nice, because core is a nice word. It would be nice if it hadn't gotten, but people have spat in that soup. So it's like, no. But the 3 deeper layers you do want to strengthen. Absolutely. You want them nice and robust, but not too much distortion of the shape by using rectus. That's the thing. And that's concept where we take our time getting across and do it very successfully. Every time someone graduates from our class, one more person in the world who is well educated and beam it out and influence others. They tend to come back with their families and their colleagues. So we're working, we used to work one back at a time. We're now working one group at a time, colleagues, families. It's very good.
That's wonderful.
Thank you for your work. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. You have teachers all over the world. Is that correct? Or
we have teachers all over the world. Many of our teachers travel. And so we are now serving the public very well.
That's wonderful. Yeah, great. And so tell us, Esther, tell our audience how you can be contacted, how they can find out more about the Gokhale Method and how to be involved in that.
So our website is very rich, Gokhale Method, Gokhale. It's a little difficult to spell. And if they forget that, just look up Esther posture and you'll find your way to our website. And my book, 8 Steps to a Pain-Free Back, is a good place to start as well. But really what people need, as I said before, is a coach. And so best is to show up at one of our teachers' free workshops and then the 6-lesson course. That's where you really learn the nuts and bolts of what it means to use your body well. And that's something we're trying to reach to everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. And what would be your ultimate advice or your best advice for someone who is going through back pain or where to start,
Start with length. Maybe I should stop there and then come see us.
That's great. Thank you.
That's part 1. To be continued.
Well, Esther, thank you so much for coming on our show today. And I will leave links for how to contact Esther, as well as get and find her programs and everything that she has to offer. As well, we're going to post all this on our Facebook page as well, our Integrate Yourself podcast community. You can always also find me at pureenergypdx.com and Maya at mayagottlieb.com. And our Patreon page is Patreon/Integrate Yourself if you want to support us. Thank you guys so much. And we'll talk to you next time.